moving it into different formats. Hare Krishna Shivaram Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Obeisances, glories to Srila Prabhupada, Gopal Bhatta Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. How are you this morning? I should say this afternoon for you.
I am your servant. I'm fine, thank you. As you can see, I'm out here in Krishna Valley. More actually, I'm in my backyard. Right now, I'm also quarantined.
Having been there, it's I know it's very peaceful and beautiful, and so maybe we could just start for a moment or two. Give us just a brief history of yourself, and particularly maybe the development of Krishna Valley, which what is like a 20-year project or more.
Getting on to 30.
Going on to 30. Just tell us some of your history.
I was fortunate enough to move into the bowling alley in Montreal in 1973 and had some wonderful association with devotees there, temple president. And then from there, I went to Winnipeg, started a temple in Minneapolis, and then went to Chicago and served Kishore Kishori. From there, I got transferred to, then I went to Texas, Harmony.
Oh, Harmony. That's right, Harmony.
That's right. That was my first experience of farm life. 3 of us on 1,500 acres. And then I came to the UK in 1980. And in 87, Harikesh Prabhu asked me to visit Hungary. And here I am. I've been living here now permanently for about the last 25 years. And in 1993, so it's 27 years, that's when we acquired property for Krishna Valley, or what's now Krishna Valley, and systematically purchased the land. This was when communism just caved in. So acquiring property was at a premium. And right now we have 400 hectares, which you multiply that by 2.4, so it's almost 1,000 acres. And a lot of that is in pasturing ground as well as agricultural land. And then we have also forests, our own forests, from which we actually get our firewood, because we don't have electricity, we don't have gas, we don't have running water. We work from a well. Most of the buildings have solar panels with water pumps that pump the water into their bathrooms and little kitchens, and then we heat with wood. And we have our own sewage system, a reed filtration sewage system, and we're quite self-sufficient. Main challenge not being on the land, the main challenge being in the mind, and transforming city slickers into farmers.
I was a bit taken aback with the idea that you personally chose the positioning of over 400,000 trees. This was largely barren land because it was pasture land, and you beautified it with over 400,000 trees. How did you decide, okay, this tree here, that tree there?
I mean, largely overall, we had, fortunately, a carte blanche on what to do over here. Unlike other places, for instance, I was simultaneously living in the UK and struggling with Bhakti Manor, just getting access to through the front gate. Here, we could do anything. We just drew on the map. This is where we want the temple. This is where we want 120 buildings. This is where we want to develop forest. And the local council said, yeah, great, as long as you're here. They were very happy because we were bringing manpower, woman power, and Lakshmi power. And that was very much wanted here over here. So it was actually, we have one devotee who was part of the Hungarian forestry, and he was the one who knew all about the trees, and I just worked with him of where they should be in order to protect us from the north wind, because we're up, although we call it Krishna Valley, actually we're on Krishna Hill. The temple's on the hill, the buildings are on the hill. So, and also where trees are best for protecting the agriculture, as well as actually having forests for providing wood. That's just, well, it's actually 500,000. And that was
500,000.
Yeah, and that was probably about 5-6 years ago. Since then, I stopped counting.
So we're talking today about ISKCON's anniversary date. The GBC SPT, the strategic planning team, decided to ask senior devotees such as yourself to illuminate the 7 purposes that were embedded in that original corporation. The purpose that we're speaking about with you today is the 6th one, which is to bring the members closer together for the purpose of teaching a simpler, more natural way of life. It was our thought that, you know, similar in astronomy, there's a particular star, the pole star, and every other star moves throughout the night. There's constant movement, but the pole star is always steady. It's always there. You know exactly where it is. And it therefore is the center star. I look at Krishna Valley knowing many of the agricultural and rural projects in ISKCON as being that pole star, the example of it. So we decided to ask you to speak about this purpose. And we really appreciate your time. So maybe we could first of all kind of start talking about what the Lord of the cows and the gopis, and how this supreme personality of Godhead decided, I want a rural life, and there's cows and there's forests and there's farming and whatnot. As you stated when we were talking earlier, this is the life that Krishna chose. Now he chose a couple of other lives. You know, there's Dwarka with the big palaces, but the Vrindavan is the most intimate. Tell us about this. Why? What is this business of Krishna? And then, if we're following in his footsteps, does that mean that we're living a rural life, etc.? Talk to us about that.
But when we're talking about Krishna and we talk about Swayam Bhagavan, then Krishna, as the supreme original personality of Godhead, expands himself. And when he's in Mathura or when he's in Dwarka, these are actually expansions. This is Vasudeva Krishna. So in the same way, the original Dham is Vrindavan. Mathura, Dwarka, Ayodhya, Vaikuntha, these are partial manifestations of where God originally prefers to live. Just like the Brijbasis are his most intimate associates, and others, they expand themselves into other forms as well. So the most perfect, Prabhupada uses that form. Krishna is most perfect, and he always says most perfect in Vrindavan, which means that this type of lifestyle in Krishna's mind is most perfect. If you're Krishna conscious, then cities can be more perfect and perfect. But this is the sort of ideal lifestyle that Krishna eternally lives in. And he's eternally living here in Vrindavan. He's not just moving around. In fact, Vrindavanam Pritaja Napadam Eka Gachati. He doesn't take one step out of Vrindavan. Soon as Akrura takes him out, Krishna goes in the water. When he comes out, it's a different Krishna. It's Vasudeva Krishna and Shankarshan. Hare Krishna, they stayed. They got off the chariot. They don't leave Vrindavan. So it's a
So
very interesting concept.
yeah. So I understand in Krishna Valley, what you did is located 600 different places that are designed to be laid out very similar to the most holy places in Brajabhumi.
Right.
To just tell us briefly about that. 600 different, stambas or something, right?
Because Srila Prabhupada, amongst the 7 points for the incorporation, the articles of incorporation, one of them was also to establish holy places. And in New Vrindavan, we were really following the instructions Srila Prabhupada gave to Kirtananda Maharaj in New Vrindavan. And, he wanted 7 temples. He said, I want a Radhakund, I want a Shamakund. And he said, when I come, I'll point out the different pastime places. So Prabhupada wanted us to make replicas, or replicas of the original Dham, which isn't a new concept. This was already done in Vrindavan by different devotees. The King Bir Hambir, who was the disciple of Srinivasacharya, in his kingdom, he transformed the whole kingdom into a replica of Vrindavan. He brought trees, plants from Vrindavan. He made Radhakund, Shamakund temples and so on. Just like, for instance, our Radhanath Swami Maharaj is also done near Mumbai. And he's really been able to do it with beautiful temples and so on. So it's not a novel concept. It was one that Srila Prabhupada wanted. And so I did the same thing. I really I spent 2 months modeling the holy places here on Vrindavan Dham.
Mm.
And there's 60 billion holy places in Vrindavan. So I didn't have time for that. And the major ones are set up. We have 14 major ones that are set with nice decorative pavilions.
Mm. So Krishna likes Vrindavan, likes rural life. How does this life facilitate better the sadhana and the practice of devotional service and the depths of devotional service? How does that work in a rural environment?
In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says living. He talks about living in the mode of the places that are in the mode of ignorance, places in the mode of passion, and the places that are in the mode of goodness. This is what God created. Man created the cities, these cities. The cities we read about, like Dwarka, are a different breed than we don't have cities existent anymore like that, unfortunately. Beautiful parks and lakes and fountains and animals and peacocks and elephants. So this is how Krishna lives. He creates this because the environment of goodness, which is very, very natural and pervasive, is conducive to spiritual life. It's not sadhana in itself, and it's not really sadhana bhakti. Sadhana means shravanam and kirtanam, and that can be done anywhere. 9 limbs of bhakti can be practiced anywhere, but this is anukul. It's very favorable. Anyway, devotees have the experience. I lived in Chicago. I lived in London. I know what it's like to try and chant rounds, what to speak of to go to sleep. I lived in a motorhome in Soho Square, or at least I tried to sleep in a motorhome in Soho Square. So it's a whole different world to living there than living here. It's conducive for spiritual life. And we need all the help that we can get. And it's a nice atmosphere.
How does a rural community connect or disconnect, whatever, with the whole modern world? And how do you create true rural life when so many things in the modern world are absolutely needed or seemingly needed. I mean, you have internet out there, right?
Yeah, it's not. They're not absolutely needed because we're not dependent on them. But here we're actually using them. In other words, if life is defined as Srila Prabhupada says, you have your food, your shelter, water, and clothing. Well, we have all of those things. Although clothing, we're still working on in terms of actually doing our own weaving. But food, water, shelter is here. And we're independent on that. These other things we use, otherwise I wouldn't be communicating with you, but my life doesn't depend on it. And my livelihood doesn't depend on it. So that's the really important thing in terms of what's essential and what then becomes something that facilitates that which is essential. Srila Prabhupada didn't want us to be excessively dependent on the world around us. He wanted us to show this alternate, let's say, alternate word, an alternate lifestyle. What is the alternate lifestyle? And of course, we're not the only one. There are literally thousands of non-devotee communities around the world who are doing a lot more than what we're doing here in Krishna Valley, and a lot more progressive. Sometimes huge communities, thousands of people.
But is there a struggle to get to some level of self-sufficiency, or is it just a natural progression of just working it through? And how do you get to self-sufficiency? In fact, even what does self-sufficiency even mean?
Srila Prabhupada had a concept that we should be able to maintain ourselves. The challenge in, for instance, well, you're in Los Angeles, and that's a pretty moderate climate. You do well over there. You probably have a couple of growing seasons. This is a relatively extreme climate. It goes from 40 degrees in the summer plus to minus 10, 15, 20 in the winter. We only have one growing season. We have to heat. We have to have insulation in houses. It's a different concept of self-sufficiency, certainly different than what it means to be self-sufficient in India. So it's a challenge. Devotees are used to having Sunday feasts, regular feasts, eating well, and so on. That type of self-sufficiency is difficult to get up to. But if it's a matter of, can we feed right now 500 devotees and maintain them for the next year or 18 months? The answer is yes. But there won't be a feast every Sunday. And they won't be eating what they want. They'll be eating what they get.
Radha Krishna Prabhu, that he has metrics on self-sufficiency, where he's analyzing this, that, this, and coming up with, we're 60% self-sufficient or whatever. What is that all about?
He has different standards, and his concept is something that more facilitates devotees' expectations rather than basic needs. And as I mentioned, there's this real difference between what devotees are used to living in cities and buying food at Tesco's and cooking whatever they want and getting food that's imported from South America, Africa, and India, to eating what grows here. And you can't tell nature that this is what I want at such and such time. This is when we just harvested. You can't see it, but right behind me, we had about 40 acres of wheat. We just harvested our wheat 3 days ago. In fact, I'm glad that one of the harvesters just stopped and they're not making any noise. that's when we get the grains. Grains come in the middle of July, and of that we really have plenty and extraordinarily sweet wheat. But vegetables and other things, fruit, they come at a certain time, and at a certain time you're eating apples until they're everywhere, and at other times, zucchini is what you have 3 times a day, and devotees have to get used to that. So Radhakrishna Prabhu's vision is to try and provide in a way that sort of at least meets devotees' expectations. But if push comes to shove, we're not dependent, and that's something that this part of the world has seen repeatedly over and over again, where people are happy when they get a piece of bread once a day.
Let's move to the householder community. Majority of our devotees, will be householders and kids, and it just seems like the environment of a rural for a child is so much better than trying to make it go in the cities. One of the difficulties I see in ISKCON in general is that the majority of our kids are going to secular schools, which creates tremendous amounts of challenge. Tell us about household life, and particularly as it relates to raising children, and how much better that is than trying to make it a go in a big city.
Can you hear the combine that over there?
Yeah.
Is that bothering you?
Doesn't bother me. It's the music to the ear.
Okay, it's not our combine. It's our neighbor over the hill.
It's a little annoying.
So, but we can't control them because it's the neighbor. The kids, I don't know, when was the last time that you've seen kids walk to school on their own? Grade school. They
I don't know. Long time.
I've lived in this building 25 years. I don't know where there's a key. I've never locked the door. I go out of Mangalartik, I come back, it's open all the time. It's a different life. It's a safe life. It's a sort of secure life. And of course, Srila Prabhupada wanted children to have that opportunity to be educated. And of course, that's Prabhupada's standard, or that's Prabhupada's way of education, in which Radhakrishna Prabhu has really done some amazing work. I can just come back to that if you want. And the environment, it's fresh air, it's clean water, the food that you eat, the neighbors are devotees, everyone comes to the morning program. So it's, children need 3 things. They need to see the same thing at home, in the environment that they're living in, and in school. And as you say, when devotees send their children to school, well, that school is a challenge to the beliefs that they're trying to pass on to them. And then what to speak of the neighbor and everybody else is also trying to introduce other unsavory habits to the children. So it really puts children in a certain degree of tension, because they're being pulled by their peers in this direction, by their parents in that direction. Usually they follow the direction of their peers. So that isn't here. It doesn't mean that this is, as my cousin called it, Shangri-La. This is not a perfect environment, or at least the results aren't 100%, but it's as good as we can offer. And I'll just go take 30 seconds. In the last 2 years, we've been working on following Arudha Devi Dasi and really transforming our education into a Bhagavatam, Varnashram based educational system. and in other words, something that's legal and something that the Hungarian government accepts. It is now with the Board of Education. It's being accepted, the entire curriculum. That means that, they get that much education from the children, primary school and through secondary school, which is based on values as opposed to results, and based on vocational training, arts and skills related to Krishna Valley. And it looks like it's going to go through, which means that 2/3 of our curriculum will be designed solely by us, and only 30% has to meet the local national standards. Really, really good work by my GBC.
Excellent. Not to throw in a doubt, but a child grows up and says, farming is farm life. I don't know. And I think I need to move to the city. I want to live a little bit different life. If he's grown up there, is he really going to be disconnected from the secular world sufficiently so that he's just stuck, or no?
No. Right now, up until this time, our secondary school, our students are going to the local school. That means that they're traveling about 30 kilometers a day there and back by bus. And dhotis and saris, were well accepted in the area. They relate with the other children there. They're appreciated. And yeah, we have examples of children who they finish school, they're 16, 17 years old, and they say, well, I want to be here, but I want to try that. Go ahead. We're here to give an opportunity. And when children are mature enough, then ultimately, like with all devotee children, at a certain point, they got to decide, I want to be a Hare Krishna devotee, and how I want to be and where I want to be a Hare Krishna devotee. But at least we've started with this option as opposed to the city option.
This notion of purpose number 6, for the purpose of teaching a simpler, more natural way of life. While we're not all going to move to a rural community, I might myself really struggle if I live there full time. Although I have to say, when I was there, it was one of the most peaceful periods of my last 5 to 10 years.
You have a good farmer profile.
Yeah. So what can we do just in the city? City life, living in a temple, living near a temple. What can we do to simplify our life a bit more? Because that's one of the things that we should be doing. Simple living, high thinking. It's one of the criteria for us, not to make our life so complex. What are some of the suggestions that you have?
Well, when I talk to youth, I'm having more and more opportunity here because we're getting more and more youth. When I was in the UK, I had plenty of opportunity. I always encourage them to really think well how much they want to, what their priorities are, and how much they want to get involved in the world that they're living with. Because you can live at different standards. And if you start thinking, I'm going to need a 10-bedroom house with a 5-car garage and so many other things, and those are my goals, then life becomes a lot more complex. If you keep it simple, keep it modest, what do I need to live here in the city? Life becomes simpler, less entangling, and actually you may have more time for practicing Krishna consciousness. So, but that's really relevant for the youth, for people who've already going down a certain track, and they join Krishna consciousness later on in life. Then we try to at least simplify, at least not make it any more difficult, and see where we can whittle off those things that we don't need. Because we live in a world that's driven by greed. Advertisement means greed. You need this. You got to buy this. You have to have a new computer, telephone, car. Well, car not every year, but the others every year, car every couple of years. So it's a consumer society. It's not based on what you need, but it's based on what you want. And advertising and industry and communications is all about increasing what you should want. So that's the opposite of what Krishna consciousness is all about. Krishna consciousness is keep it simple and keep it basic so that you have time for spiritual life, because all of those things rob you for spiritual life. And this is what Srila Prabhupada here says, for teaching a simpler, more natural way of life. And the other thing that I would suggest, which I don't know if you have, but we had, when I was young, my parents had a country place, and there's a lot of value in a country place. One is that you can get to grips with actually the nature itself, learn what it means to feed yourself, to live in the country, and you have an alternative. You have an alternative to that city life. My understanding of what Srila Prabhupada had taught was that we shouldn't put too much stock in the current civilization and lifestyle continuing on ad infinitum. At a certain point, it's going to end. Or at least it's going to end with a real crash. And devotees should ensure for themselves and their family an alternative. Now, it may be a Krishna Valley alternative if they can get together, but at least if I've got a country place, then I can be away from the maddening crowds, and I can build up an alternate lifestyle for myself, which a lot of people do.
So essentially, living in a city requires us, so to speak, to see through the fallacies of so many elements of modern day society and anesthetize ourselves from them by just opting for the simplicity. Drive a Toyota instead of a Mercedes simply because it's spending less money on that and it's less complex, etc.
And it's greener and it's better for the environment. Living according to what this planet can actually offer us. And then a lot of people are opting for bicycles instead of the Toyota. And they're trying that, and it's good exercise as well, provided you don't live too far from your place of work.
Now, when you were talking about the education, you started speaking about the coursework and making it based on the Bhagavatam, making it based on Varnashram. So how does a rural life, Varnashram, what's the connection there? What's your realization about Varnashram?
Srila Prabhupada left in 1977, left Vrindavan in a really precarious state of health. And he came to the West. He wanted to go to Gitanagari. And he wanted to, he said, I want to sit down and I want to teach how to realize Varnashram. So, I mean, Varnashram is not the exclusive property of farming communities or a rural community. Varnashram is about values, and it's about living according to value in values-based ashram and value-based work or varna. And what are those actual values wherever I'm living? But one thing for sure is that when you're in an environment, when your community is completely harmonious, they all have the same goal, it becomes very easy to actually have something that resembles a social system. I say resemble because my understanding of Varnashram, if you're really talking about guna karma and people's natures, it requires a lot of devotees. we got 150 devotees living here and another 150 in the village. So that's 300. But out of those 300 devotees, maybe there's 2 or 3 Brahmins. It takes more Brahmins to worship Radhashama Sundar. So other people who are not by nature Brahmins also have to do that service. Farmers, like you brought up the point about, your nature is not like that of a farmer. Well, so it's difficult to actually find devotees who are really willing to just work with the bulls and cows all their life. It has to be their nature. And there's a statistical division between how many devotees are suitable for Brahminical work. They don't come after 2 years saying, "Oh, it's too much. I can't handle this deity worship. It's too intense." For people who that's their life, they don't have any alternate, and this is the way they see themselves. Or someone who, yes, they're just happy. Whether they're digging in the garden, they're working with the bulls, they're cooking in the kitchen. It takes a larger community. In a community this size, we still have to use the ISKCON principle of utility, and everyone has to do the needful. But it comes together. But certainly the environment facilitates that, because we don't have anyone else challenging our values around us. There's no one, our neighbors are not doing something different. The whole environment in which we're living in is homogeneous. It's not like that in the city, where we talk about having a devotee community, but very often those devotee communities don't really have many things in common. They have Krishna in common, they may have their temple in common, but everyone has so many different values or ideas. To live like this, you have to have certain stated ideals and values that ultimately everyone has to live by, which means we have our own set of laws, rules, and regulations that devotees are required to live by. So that makes Varnashram easier, because now we have common values.
What are some of those laws? What are some of those principles?
Well, let's start with the basics. 16 rounds, 4 regulative principles, attending the morning program unless you happen to be out in the garden early or with the cows, milking the cows. So these are basic spiritual principles that are there for everyone. Another one here is that we have no individual proprietorship. Everything in New Brajadan belongs to Radhesham. The buildings, the land, everything. And it's a sort of a communal, spiritual, communistic system, and that there's a certain weighted way in which devotees receive in kind. It means that they will get a certain amount of Lakshmi for basic needs, and that's worked out with different formulas. Are they brahmachari or a man and wife with 1 child, 2 child, 3 children? Does sound like something you can handle?
No, but I will tell you that one of the most, I would say maybe the single most remarkable thing about the time that I spent there with you and the devotees was this consciousness that Radhesham Sundar are the center and the owner, and everybody revolves around them. That level of Krishna consciousness just took me aback. I was just so amazed and so peaceful, so to speak. I felt like I was owned and controlled by the Lord.
It's literally the ethos. Everything belongs to Radhesham. It may not be the way all communities develop. We have, other communities that function in a different way. Once again, New Vrindavan was like that. Everything belonged to New Vrindavan. But we want to be we want to be balanced, and at the same time ensure the devotees have their needs, but at the same time everyone's sort of living at the similar lifestyle, which means that the concept of competition amongst each other is not there. The idea is that we should facilitate the mission that Srila Prabhupada set up. This is, the devotees who live here are 95% all book distributors. So they're all mission-oriented, they're preaching-oriented, and for them now, with their 1, 2, 3 children, the mission is to realize what Srila Prabhupada wanted. Prabhupada wanted books distributed, so they distributed books for 20 years. Prabhupada wanted this type of rural life, so now they're doing this.
The whole notion of spreading Krishna consciousness, your yatra is very strong on book distribution. I don't know what the actual numbers are. I just know that it's a main focus of it. And while at the same time you're in this rural community, I found out that maybe 30 or 40,000 people a year come to visit you. So even the life that you're living out there is preaching, yeah?
We have to. With these devotees, we couldn't just shut them off from the rest of the world. They were too used to, they want to see preaching results. They don't just want to see heads of corn and potatoes. They want to see human beings also, and they want to be able to talk to people. So we do have between 20 to 30,000 people, depending on how good the summer is, or rather how bad the summer is. The more it's cloudy, the more the people come. And in fact, right now, that's why I mentioned in the beginning that I'm in quarantine over here, that this weekend we're having our fair. Now, because of COVID-19, it was really up in the air. Should we, shouldn't we, can we, can we? Now the government said, yes, it's all right. And so with social distancing and masks and gloves and everything else, we're downscaled a little, but let's see. Usually anywhere from 7, 8, 10,000 people come for the weekend. And there is not any, there's some, but I can say, just generalizing, there's nobody in Hungary who doesn't know about Krishna Valley. Either they've been here, they've heard about it, or they know someone who's been here, or they've seen it on TV, whether it's the Prime Minister on down. And, you know, sometimes I get a telephone call saying, oh, you got to run over to the barn because the Minister of Agriculture is over here looking around, and can you come and talk to him? And they just show up with their families. It's really well known. It is, literally speaking, on the map of Hungary, itself, Krishna Valley. So we're preaching, and devotees are going out. We have a full-time communication department. We have wonderful relationships with the local. Well, Radha Krishna is the mayor's assistant, or the sub-mayor here in the local village, and in the whole county. I was just looking for the word. So we have very, very good relationships with people.
Let's just jam on that relationship notion. Does a rural, simpler life make devotional relationships richer and deeper, or does it make a difference in that?
Look at what Prabhupada says in this Purpose 6. Teaching a simpler, more natural way of life. So it's richer because it's more natural. It makes relationships, you know, when you're living in city, you have to wear different types of hats all the time with different types of people. Here, there's only one hat. It's the same with everybody. Of course, people have their issues, but community development, and that's something that we try to enrich with our counselor system. But community development becomes much more realistic, and I think much more productive in this type of environment because it's natural. And it doesn't require any artifices, and so people can relate to each other in a more natural way.
Mm.
And of course, they're my neighbor. They're the person who I'm worshiping with on a daily basis. And my life also depends on him, because if he doesn't do his job properly, I may not eat. So there's good relationships.
Hmm. Let's just shift to COVID-19. Dramatic, powerful, strong, crazy kind of thing. Has your Krishna Valley made it easier to deal with this worldwide pandemic?
Initially, for 2 months, we were in absolute lockdown, and that was absolute lockdown. Anything that arrived in the front gate sat there for 4 days before it got into the property. No one came in, and anyone who went out didn't come back. We thought for a few months. Now things are opening up. Hungary's doing relatively good by comparison to other places, such as California or even the UK, States. Let's see if it stays like that. I'm a little wary, and I'm being locked down here myself by my GBC and the zonal supervisor. They won't let me get out the gate.
Need to be very, very safe, Maharaj.
We're taking all precautions. There's 3 of us here living in the house. We wash, we clean. Someone else cooks, who's also, and we're taking precautions. Now we'll see what happens when guests come here. But, we're sort of at the end of the road as it is. We're far away. We're in the country, in a country itself, in Hungary, which has quite minimal influence of COVID to date. But we're surrounded by other places. Italy is to the south, and so Serbia, and Germany's to the north, and the borders are open right now.
We're getting close to the end of our time together, so let's just go back specifically to that 6th purposes, this natural way of life, simpler way of life. If you could just provide us with your general advice, being in a rural or not, living in a city, what should we do to live up to this primary purpose that Prabhupada gave us as one of the 7 purposes?
Well, in ISKCON, and because while I was on the GBC, I really emphasized not just Varnashram, but the whole concept of farms and revitalizing our farms is one of the missions that Srila Prabhupada gave us. We can't but do it. We can't ignore it and say that Prabhupada didn't say it. He visited them, he stayed at those places, he encouraged the leaders, whether it was Murari Sevak or New Vrindavan or Gita Nagari, even Bhaktivedanta Manor. He told us, first he was thinking, why are we so far out of London and Bhaktivedanta Manor? And then Prabhupada saw that we had ample land. He said, you grow your food, and at night you load up a bullock cart with vegetables, your excess. You go to sleep. In the morning, the bull pulls you into Covent Garden, and you get up in the morning and you sell your excess vegetables and come back to the manor. So Prabhupada had this concept, and ISKCON as a whole needs to support it, which is not just the GBC, 30 plus Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, but it's about the rest of the society, that it's a need. And after 54 years, devotees really need to own this. You're a member of ISKCON. What role can we play in order to realize that, whether it's helping my local temple or area, whatever the local GBC's plan is or should be to make such a facility happen. New Vrindavan didn't happen on its own. There's no people to make devotees in the area. There's no money in the local area. It's a poor place. It happened by the cooperative effort of the Hungarian devotees, and it continues to exist like that. Manpower comes here, although now Krishna Valley attracts its own manpower, but other centers naturally send devotees here. And although New Rajadam is now sort of financially independent, but at the same time, it also receives certain subsidy from the government. You can't just send people out to the country and say, make it happen. It's got to be a whole yatra effort, however you want to define that yatra, and devotees have to be willing to sacrifice for that. Because ultimately, you can't eat either your computers, your jobs, your PhD, or anything else. Everyone depends, everyone lives on food. And we need to be able to provide our own food, because in times of need, if it ever comes to that, other people may not be willing to give us their food. So we should be able to provide for devotees for food. But, that's Aesop's fable between the cricket and the grasshopper. So we can't be whiling away our time. We really need to make sure that we're able to take care of our devotees, provide for them. It's part of devotee care, and also show people that this is still possible. Because there are other farming communities, and there are very, very successful, much more productive than ours, and much more self-reliant, and they even live at a lower standard, the simpler life. But they're missing, and they don't have Krishna at the center, and they don't know what the social system should be, which is Varnashram. So that type of support is really required, and both from the grassroots level, at the top, at the GBC, to invest heavily, invest in the food that we eat, in providing our children, and for those devotees who do want it, the type of lifestyle which Srila Prabhupada here says, simpler, natural. It's natural. That city life is artificial. Artificial things you got to put a lot of energy to maintain. This sort of flows a lot easier.
Okay, Maharaj, we really thank you so much for your valuable time.
Gopal, one
yes,
thing.
Yes, please.
I really would like to thank you on behalf of the devotees and the SPT team for what you are doing. You, with these broadcasts that are coming out twice a day, are really fantastic. They're needed. They're bringing the society together. I hope that they emphasize more farm and community life. And I hope that the GBC body recognizes your work and the SPT work in the way that it should be recognized.
Well, thank you very much, but I accept that only on behalf of the almost 20 devotees that are participating in this effort.
They're doing a wonderful service.
Oh, it's just so wonderful. We started this sometime in the very beginning of April, and our team has now gone for 3.5 months, every single day at 4 a.m. Pacific time, so that we are able to gather our team on a worldwide basis. We have only missed one day, and that was Lord Nrsingadev's appearance day, in terms of our conference calls. And so we've all been working very, very hard. There's brilliant people on this team. Of course, Konteya Prabhu has been the facilitator. We're just really thrilled that we have some meaningful devotional service. And so
you should really know that it's appreciated. I'm sitting there at around 7 a.m. in the morning and writing, and then all of a sudden, there it is. It pops up on my screen immediately. I go, okay, let's see what's new today. And And aside from the remembrances of Bhakti Charu Maharaj, which were sort of melancholy things to read or hear, unfortunately, but it's been really soul-stirring, and I think you're really doing what Srila Prabhupada wants, which is also saying here, bring the members closer together. And using this communication means to bring them together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.